we all know the power of why. So I wanted to ask you, what is your biggest motivation behind what you do at C Collective?
There's a few quotes that you probably know that come to my mind. I think the first one is, being the change that you want to see, and partnering with other people who want to form this sort of coalition of change. Even more so recently, we've had this constant disinformation campaigns, from your merchants of doubts, the climate deniers, the climate delayers, from the oil and gas, petrochemical lobby, you name it. We need to stop thinking about growth and GDP growth that is, never ending. We need to redefine our KPIs and think about thriving rather than just growing. We just need those bigger businesses to be part of the change. Of course, there's always the early adopters, the pioneers, the small businesses that are super agile, but the bigger ones, they need to be part of the systemic change. You really have to look at your impact, risk, opportunities over time, because we know that all those risks are already there, but they are going to unravel even more if we do nothing. So we have to adapt and so on. So there's a really good framework as well that we can use, which is
Marie Geneste, welcome to the Shades of Life podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So it's the first time I actually interview someone French like me, but we will do the podcast all in English. Sorry, guys, listening, no French today. So Marie, you are one of the founders of the C Collective, a company scaling regenerative solutions through outstanding user experiences. In this conversation with you, we will share what you can do for entrepreneurs to help them create net positive impacts, whether you are leading a social or environmental startup or a more traditional business. So first question, which I thought was intriguing, why C in the C Collective? Does it mean something?
Yeah, well, at least it's a very good conversation starter, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we often get asked this question, actually. Initially, when we created the C Collective and thought about branding, we had thought about climate or circularity collective, but it was actually too long first. And then also, we did not want to focus too much on one particular aspect of sustainability and work with all types of innovation that had a positive impact on people and planet. So we just thought, okay, let's keep the C. It will make things shorter, and then people can imagine what the C is. Yeah, so that was it. So it's going to be C for conversation starter.
Exactly. I love it. Thank you, Mary. So I wanted to talk about talking climate, circularity, etc. I wanted to talk about your early affinity for sustainability, because you wrote your business school thesis on sustainable business in 2004, which was really early to tackle this topic. I worked with sustainability for perhaps 4 years, and before that with a more traditional business. Obviously, things have changed and accelerated in the past years, and we are going to continue. So I wanted to ask you, have you always been sensitive to this topic? And what were your motivations? Where does the motivation come from?
Yeah, so I'm French, like you, and I was born and I grew up in a very natural environment in the center of France, literally in the middle of nowhere, so surrounded by lush nature, forest and fields. So I think that probably influenced my connection to nature. And actually, when I was probably 16 or so, I wanted to become a forest engineer. But unfortunately, I joined the dark side and I studied at a business school. in France. And this is at the end of my curriculum at this business school. This is when I discovered there was a course on sustainability or sustainable business. And I decided to do my thesis with a friend on this topic. And I was really interested to the point that I wanted to work in this field when I graduated. But back then, there was hardly anything. It was super, super, super niche. So I ended up, because I was majoring in marketing, working for blue chip companies, the likes of Microsoft, Orange in telcos. And then fast forward, moving to the UK, working in digital tech and service design. I went back to the topic of sustainability after having my second child, after trying to do as much as I could on the personal front. I thought it would make sense for me to align my personal affinity with the topic with my professional career. And at this time as well, I could see there was a potential for bringing this expertise to an emerging climate tech or impact tech ecosystem in the UK. So that was the sort of loop after a digression, working with more like big tech.
Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, I did the Burgundy Business School in France a bit before you. I graduated before you. And there was no sustainability classes at that time. Otherwise, I would have probably taken it because I was already interested in this as well. Yeah, that's interesting. So when I meet someone, I really love to go back to the backstory because you obviously co-created a company. And I saw that one of your co-founders, Alessandro Mele, had a successful career in investment banking, but then he redefined his life path and career to bring back ethics to the financial world. And he's saying on your website he was quite disappointed by past experiences of working with traditional marketing and communication agencies. And he looked for a partner with strong expertise and shared values. So is it how you two met? And did you have a similar transition trajectory? I think you gave us some elements of that already.
Yeah. So I think I was already a couple of years into my transition working as a consultant, as a freelance consultant for impact tech in the UK, when I think I saw a message on LinkedIn by Alessandro where he was posting just about that. Well, I'm looking for a partner to set up a consultancy for sustainable business. So we spoke, we had a really good connection, and I think value alignment was really there, and a good set of complementary skills. And then we decided to join forces, and I also added my touch or my culture of user-centered design to the mix, not just focusing only on marketing and communications, but also on the design of products and services, brands, websites, which I had been practicing as part of an agency previously before transitioning into the impact space.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was how we met and decided to form the C Collective about probably 6 years ago.
Yeah, and it demonstrates that it's so easy to meet with people on LinkedIn. So that's great to hear a story like this, where this is where you met your co-founder. So we all know the power of why. So I wanted to ask you, what is your biggest motivation behind what you do at C Collective?
Well, there's a few quotes that you probably know that come to my mind. I think the first one is, being the change that you want to see. And partnering with other people who want to form this sort of coalition of change. So I think that's really important. It's if not you, then who is going to do it? And so I think it's really important in shaping my personality and my willingness to take up this fight, I should say. And then there's another quote that I love from Margaret Mead, which is something along the lines of never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, because it's the only thing that ever has. And I think it's really what motivates me. There's nothing that brings me more joy and fulfillment than being part of this change and working with truly brilliant, super motivated and very inspiring people. So whether they're activists, they're entrepreneurs, sustainability champions, intrapreneurs. So it's highly fulfilling for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the quotes, and it's if not you, who, if not now, when as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is this very interesting statistic showing that at the moment, while vast majority of Europeans say they want to consume more ethically and sustainably, the market shares of sustainable products and services are still below 10%. So what would you say, why are we still seeing such a low intake for sustainable options, in your opinion?
Well, we call that, researchers talk about the intention action gap or attitude behavior gap for sustainable consumption. So there are many explanations, but yeah, essentially, when I talk at events or in webinars, I often quiz people about one stat, which is the market share of organic food in the UK. And I'm going to quiz you actually. Do you know what it is? The market share of organic in the food and drinks market in the UK. Do you have an idea?
I'm tempted to say it's high, but that's a good question. I would say at least 20%, but I would hope it's much higher. I don't know.
Well, it's actually much lower. So I constantly monitor this stat because I use it over and over again. It's actually 1.7% in 2023 in the UK. So it's nothing, So and there's a lot of factors, but just shows that
the 1.7%.
yeah, it's not even growing. It grew, but then it stagnated because of the cost of living crisis and other things. But yeah, if you look at other categories, so recently I've been working in EVs as well. The share of electric cars sales in the UK is beyond 10%, but it's 16.5% last year, 2023. So it's better, but it's still not, it's not mainstream. It hasn't become the norm. So there's still a huge gap that we need to fill by scaling all these innovations so that they become the norm, the new normal in a way. So the why, to answer your why question, why are we still seeing such a low intake? So I think there's many reasons. But first, I always encourage people to start with the human factor, so to speak. So I like all things around evolutionary psychology or behavioral economics and psychology. But so what evolutionary psychology says is that all behaviors, they are rooted in our DNA. They've been like this for forever, over millennia in a way. So it's about status, it's about short-termism, disregard of the risk that we can't really. It's about egoism. It's all about me, the individuals, and this is just something that's part of our DNA, and that hasn't evolved as our civilization has evolved. So this is a DNA element. And then when you look into also behavioral psychology, there are other things like, for instance, cognitive dissonance. There is also, the whole topic around people that are shutting up, where there's a lot of doom and gloom happening with them within the news, and they prefer to just ignore what's happening rather than act. There is also this concept of environmental risk being felt, and well, less so these days, but as a distant risk in time and space. So that doesn't really help, and that reinforces this cognitive dissonance when something that is not in line with your behavior, you just tell yourself a story to make yourself feel good. It's like, it's the same thing that happens when people smoke. They always find good reasons not to quit smoking. So these are two interesting disciplines that shed some light on what's happening. But they're not, these traits they're not set in stone, and obviously they differ from one person to the other. But I think for designers, marketers, or policymakers, it's really important to have them in mind so they can create strategies to overcome them through the design of user experience, of specific policies, and also storytelling.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, if we look at the more systemic level, is that all these human patterns have led to the creation over centuries again of our system, this really extractive system, unfair system. And they are really tightly intertwined within this system. So it's really hard to break free from it, from this extractive and unfair system. So I think that's really important to understand the complexity. And then even more so recently, we've had this constant disinformation campaigns, from your merchants of doubts, the climate deniers, the climate delayers, from the oil and gas, petrochemical lobby, you name it. Sometimes, acting in the shadow, but I think even more openly these days. And plus, more recently, we've had a surge of right-wing propaganda financed by very powerful people, amplified by super powerful social media. And these guys, they want to maintain the status quo, maintain that system that works really well for their small elite, and not solve the meta crisis of climate, nature, and social collapse. So I'm going to stop there. But it's really something that people need to understand, that it's very complex. But it's really worth understanding the systemic nature of why things are not moving at the pace that we need. And by the way, I really invite your listeners to take a look at a fantastic workshop that I did a few months ago that really breaks down the complexity of this, and also opens up the solutions for coalitions of change and conscious evolution of our systems and of individuals to reset the system. And it's called Conscious Evolution Collage, and it's available in many offline and in online formats. So it's really eye-opening. So you can put that in the show notes, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll definitely send you the link.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. I mean, it is such an interesting discussion. And this is also why I wanted to have you on the podcast today, because, myself, I have worked for a big company in the past. I've put together a whole sustainability program proposal, and there were all these nice statistics, of people saying, yes, the majority of people across age groups wanting to do something, buy more sustainable, etc. But there is definitely a discrepancy between what people say and what people do. And, for entrepreneurs who come to the market with products or services that, are there to do something about the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, waste and pollution, and etc., circularity models, new circularity models. I think they need to understand this discrepancy, because you can come with something great and then it doesn't work. It's like, oh, why? And unless you understand these mechanisms, because at the end of the day, you will only be as successful as what people buy from you. So to be successful at that, you need to understand what's going to motivate people, but also these transitions and this evolution that we are all going through at the moment. And as you said very rightly, it's not happening from one day to another. It takes time. And gradually, I think there is a whole movement that certainly I have seen growing over the past 3 to 4 years, certainly. and it's going to continue to grow. But yeah, then people go to what's my everyday? What does it mean to me in my everyday? And they stick to basics rather than a worldview sometimes. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, it's true there is only so much that individuals can do, but individual action is necessary on top of systemic action that is more driven by politicians and more institutions and states and so on. But we need both. We need to act at individual and collective level for sure.
So, Marie, your key focus is on creating outstanding user experiences to help entrepreneurs grow and mainstream their solutions. So, let's go right in the heart of the topic. How would you define an outstanding user experience today in that context?
Well, maybe first it's worth defining user experience, what it means to us. For us, it's the sort of product of the sequence of interactions between users and any type of organization across different channels and over the buying journey. That's the sequence. So it's really about how your prospect, your customer experiences your brand across all of its facets, and how you make them feel by triggering positive, negative, or neutral emotions. So it's really about, I always quiz people, what is the currency of user experience or customer experience? It's about emotions. So when you create this emotional connection, it's much easier to engage with people, across the buying journey, and to create this outstanding and seamless user journey that gets users to understand what you do and to convert as clients or users, basically, from all the way from awareness to advocacy.
Yeah, okay, that's great. So, to expand slightly on this, if today I have a product or a service that I want to market, and you tell me we are going to create an outstanding user experience for it in Grid, what does it mean concretely, and how do you do that?
So I think maybe we can talk about the outcome. So for me, the outcome, or the holy grail, if I can say, we're aiming for, is to create a virtuous cycle where throughout all the buying journey, from awareness, consideration, conversion, delighting and your customers, and then allowing him to become an advocate, you have this seamless cycle. And so when you have great marketing, great stories, great product experience or service experience, you easily convert your clients or your prospects into clients, and then you have happy clients who get value from your offer, and also potentially they feel good about doing the right thing by buying your sustainable product or solution. And then they buy more services, and they become advocates. So they're going to tell their friends, their peers about how cool your product is, and that's going to make your acquisition strategy much more efficient, and from a cost and also time to market point of view. So that's the holy grail for me of a great user experience strategy and operations.
Yeah. So when we are talking of marketing sustainable solutions, what would you say is the difference, or makes the difference, between a traditional marketing and communication agency? And obviously one of your co-founders was frustrated with that. Mm-hmm. And one whose mission is to market sustainable solutions. What's the difference between the two?
I'm not sure I can speak on behalf of all other design and marketing consultancies focusing on sustainability innovation, but at least I can talk about how we operate and what makes us special and drive us, like, our why. So what I can tell you is that our design and marketing services are grounded on people and planet-centered practices. So we design stories, products/services that serves users' needs, and this is something that we do by doing good, deep user research. But also, what we also do is holistically bring positive impact to people and planet, of course. And so, at the heart of what we do, there are ecological values in our people, in our team members, but also a deep understanding of those environmental and social systems that we were talking about. So across the team, we have climate and biodiversity trainers that have trained, hundreds or thousands of people on those topics. We have practitioners of systems change, systems design. We are also partners of the Donut Economics Action Lab, which has a fantastic framework. And we also partner with leadership coaches who can support our clients on the sort of inner change journey that also needs to be part of the wider organizational change journey that needs to happen. So that's for me, that's a unique combination of skills and value alignment that helps us design solutions that are truly regenerative and resilient, which means they have a net positive impact on people and planet. So this is what, this is this combination of skills and values that drive what we do.
Yeah, I really love that you started with your why and, what are our ethics. Because I think when you enter a room, whether you're a marketing agency, a business, wherever you are, whatever you do, I think when you enter a room, it's about the impulse and the intention. And in the past, I took part to so many meetings when the only impulse was, how can we create more sales? And you started by, let's put people and planet first. That doesn't mean we don't want to create sales. Of course we do. But when the only purpose is let's create more sales and more profit and, more, it's very different that when you say, let's on the basis of doing something for people and planet, let's create more sales. It's two very different messages. I can't tell you how much unmotivated I've been in the past when working only on the let's create more sales and there was nothing else around it.
Yeah, and that really resonates with, I'm sure you're familiar with Kate Raworth, Donut Economics, and one of the things that she says is that we need to stop thinking about growth and GDP growth that is never ending. We need to redefine our KPIs and think about thriving rather than just growing. And there are some really advanced business pioneers that have managed to do this, and they've said we don't need to massively grow, we just need to be to have small profit and make sure that our environment or our people, our customers and partners are thriving, and they can be very successful in achieving this, but it's about being really brave of redefining what success means and replacing the concept of unsustainable growth by maybe the concept of thriving. What does it mean for you as a business, as an organization to thrive? And that can also apply, by the way, on the at the individual level, and that's a very healthy set of questions to ask yourself as a leader.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, it also goes back to, and I think a lot of people are doing that at the moment. What do we define as wealth creation, as abundance? And that's one of my pillars for the podcast and the digital magazine. And we all know that wealth is more than just money. It's great. Money is great, but it's more than that, as you just described. So something I love in what you do is that you target both social and environmental startups, but also traditional businesses. And I find that so important. So was it something important for you to work with both type of businesses? Was it like an intention from the beginning?
It was more a natural evolution. So when we started, we were focused on working with I call them natural-born impact entrepreneurs. So people focusing on a specific solution to a problem, for instance, net zero building, greenhouse gas monitoring, life cycle analysis, solutions or calculators. We had also a client who is a sustainability expert, marketplace or rewilding charity. So this kind of people and solutions. So we focused on this type of entrepreneurs, but then I trained as a facilitator of a series of workshops. One of them is Climate Risk, and that environmental education work led us to work with larger businesses, tier one banks, people from like industry background and so on. So all sort of industries. And I was quite frustrating to just leave after a half-day workshop. That was just, touching the potential set of actions that the business could do, but it was too short to get into the detail. So I was really happy to find a way whereby we could help them beyond just education. So help them start this journey with a better understanding of the systems that they are operating within, and then take them on the next stages, because we just need those bigger businesses to be part of the change. Of course, there's always the early adopters, the pioneers, the small businesses that are super agile, but the bigger ones, they need to be part of the systemic change. And I think they are starting to understand that they need to transition if they want to stay relevant, or simply stay afloat, survive those crises they're also facing.
Yeah, it's a great way to innovate as well, I think, for them.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, how does your approach then vary between the two when working with them? Are there distinct differences between the startups and the impact startups and the traditional businesses? Because I've seen on your website that you offer distinct services to both, that you adapt according to their profile. So can you tell us about that?
Sure. So for your typical climate tech startup or social entrepreneur, we typically help them with user research to better understand the deep needs of their stakeholders, and that helps inform like branding strategies, product or service design, website design, marketing strategies as well. And so that's usually the type of services we help them with, because they usually have a good understanding of the climate systems or natural systems. However, sometimes we can also help them, look at those systems more holistically. So maybe reflect on their business model to get them to think not just about the particular aspect that they are trying to solve, but about other aspects of their business in terms of impact, risk, and opportunities. But I'd say that usually we are quite focused on helping with our classic design toolkit. On the other side, if we look at more traditional businesses, usually they are much bigger, they are much more mature, and they've been around for a while. So we often start with the foundation of education on climate and biodiversity, so they get a better understanding of cause and effect of environmental crisis, the social element as well, so the systemic nature as well of the problem, and so that they can have this knowledge at sort of from board to bottom. And that lays a foundation for collective action, and embedding their strategy, their sustainability strategy, into a better understanding. And then this is when we then bring our strategy and design toolbox. So we help their in their leadership or sustainability champions, depending on who is involved, understand more deeply their impact, but across not just climate change or biodiversity crisis, but beyond the 9 planetary boundaries. Look at the social impact, the social needs that they need to fulfill, in their with their employees, but also in their supply chain, and then look at all these impacts, but also the risk and opportunities that are happening across those planetary boundaries, social needs, etc. And once they understand, they have this assessment in place, they can think about, okay, what can we redesign and how can we do it? And this is where we bring our facilitation skills to support this transformation process, and this through like classic design, diverging, converging processes and so on, innovation development processes, and so that they can quickly find solutions and start implementing them for better resilience and a positive impact.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Marie. I've worked with both types of businesses, traditional business and impact startups. And there are clearly differences. So that's good that you are taking us through this journey in this conversation. So I wanted to dive a little bit more into each type of business because there will be people working for both who listen to the podcast for sure. So for traditional businesses, I wanted to ask you, what trend are you seeing? Is it them who approach you, or do you pitch your vision? And how open would you say are traditional businesses to regenerative business design in general, based on your experience?
Well, I'd say it's the regenerative word has certainly become a buzzword, but it doesn't mean it's easy to sell into traditional business. I think businesses are still very much focused on the short term. Sometimes they have this sort of carbon tunnel vision in their sustainability strategy. So they have a start of an understanding, but it doesn't reach all of the teams or levels, and they also need to understand things beyond just climate change, because their supply chain usually depends on many things that are happening across the planetary boundaries and many social aspects. So that's the problem, is that they have a limited understanding of the system they're part of, and even if they do, they are not there yet in terms of taking responsibility for their contributions to the system. So in terms of joining the dots between what they know and what they're doing. So climate and biodiversity awareness workshops are fairly easy to sell in a way, as it's a half-day workshop, so it doesn't require a lot of investment in people's time and budget, and also they're quite fun, so it's also a good team building activity. But beyond that, more like regenerative transformation or transition is much more complex and scary, actually. So we try to talk about things like creating resilience, averting risk, making sure that their employer brand will attract the right people, because very few young people want to work with climate wrecking companies. We talk about future-proofing their business. So just trying to frame things into very down-to-earth consideration that business leaders have. And that's the best way for us to pitch this to this type of change to traditional businesses.
Yeah, I love that you're making it very real, because that's exactly the situations we face with traditional businesses. And I will have a wonderful CEO on the podcast very soon. And I actually used to work in investment banking as well, like your co-CEO. But we are going to talk about, companies are facing and will face increasing risk when it comes to the climate crisis, etc., which can come at any entry point in their supply chains. Or you could have a storm in a country where they have a plant, for example,
Yeah.
all sorts of scenarios. So I agree with you when you say people today are very open to workshops, which I think is a great like Trojan horse.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, because it does work really well and people are really sensitive to this, but then it's what's the next step. And yeah, that's really interesting. So I wanted to ask you, and perhaps you can expand on the challenges you already cited. It disappeared. So what challenges do you usually face when it comes to traditional businesses? Is there anything else you'd like to bring up?
Well, I think it's just people's resistance to deep change in all forms. This is where we also work with like leadership coaches and psychologists as partners to make sure that we can also support people on the leadership change journey, on the inner change journey that absolutely needs to happen. I mean, when you are the CEO of a big company, you have a board to report to, you have so much responsibility. So making change happen is a huge challenge, and sometimes there's also some huge ego things that needs to be unpacked. And this is where we know that the inner change journey is as important as the outer change journey, and is like the foundation also of the organizational change journey that needs to happen for sure.
Yeah. So as a transition to my next question, so personally, when I was trying to put together a sustainability program in my big company in the past, I was really selling the story internally and everybody was very much behind it, actually, at least in marketing, sales. And then I started to meet the people in logistics. And they were on board with the idea, love it. But then the feedback I would get was, well, I only want to help you if the chairman says yes. If you have the go from, the upper levels. So that was really, otherwise people didn't want to invest their time and their energy and their budget, in starting to move things around, which makes sense. So I wanted to ask you, do you have any tricks up your sleeve to deal with challenging or mixed reactions when you approach a traditional business and perhaps with the C-suites, I don't know, when they are not 100% on board with transforming their business and impact leading to regenerative leadership? Any piece of advice?
Well, I'd say that we come in as facilitators of a conversation, basically, at least in the early stages of the process. We do have some expertise about climate science, environmental science, and so on. But it's not so much about, giving a lecture. It's about creating a safe space for this learning to happen and those conversations to happen. So a little anecdote, not so long ago, I did a climate awareness workshop in a company, fairly small company, but probably around 500 people, global company. And the guy who brought me in, he said, "Oh, I think, well, you'll need to be careful with the CEO. I think he's a bit of a climate denier. So yeah, I'm just letting you know because you may have to manage that." And so he was there. There were about 8 people from different departments in the business. And I realized, but just by having these open conversations, that the CEO was actually absolutely on board with that. But he was just very afraid about the reaction of his clients to any form of change, because they were dealing with high net worth individuals. And he was like, how can I pitch sustainability into my service? Because these people, they don't care about the cost. They have huge expectations in terms of service. So he was more, what was hindering his behavior was more fear
Yeah.
than disbelief or lack of understanding of the science. So it's really interesting to unpack that into this open conversation. So that's one trick, create a safe space for those conversations to happen, and make sure as well that you have the right people around the table. So you were talking about corporate silos and people wanting to make sure they had buy-in from the CEO or the board. So I think it's really important that you have different levels of the business involved, and also different departments, because a lot of times this is why people see the value in bringing external facilitators, is because people don't really speak to each other.
Yeah.
So what we do in the workshop, this donut mapping workshop, is that we offer is during half a day, we get people to spend some time looking at the planetary boundaries and the social needs, and looking at impact, risk, and also opportunities together as a team. And so they can have the same level of understanding and start getting a glimpse of what they can do about it together, and talk about the limitations and agree on something together. And obviously, yes, supply chain will have to do things, but then finance will have to do things. So I think having a diverse set of people from different levels and also different departments is a key element of getting that change to happen. And so that's really important. So then the obvious key thing is to make sure they have this 360 holistic view of their impact and risk and opportunities, not just climate, not just biodiversity, something that is really holistic. And then the last dimension is time. So there is you really have to look at your impact, risk, opportunities over time, because we know that all those risks are already there, but they are going to unravel even more if we do nothing. So we have to adapt and so on. So there's a really good framework as well that we can use, which is called Three Horizons by Bill Sharp, and it allows you to think about different time horizons to bring about change, and also make sure there is no abrupt change, but there is a planned transition with a long-term view of what the future could be and how you get there. So that's the Three Horizons framework, which is really good. So it's really 360 planetary boundaries, social needs, and then the other dimension is time. So looking at the long-term impact and planning for that. So so I think that's the key tricks that that we use, and I think makes sense to take up those huge challenges.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I must say the word facilitator really resonates for me as part of our conversation. I find that so important because, as you said, teams in a company, especially when it's a bigger company, they all go with their day and their tasks with their own departments. And it's how do you put them together? And as you said, the people who also matter in the decision making, because they all influence each other at the end of the day. They are all used to interact with each other at board meetings, at strategy meetings, etc. And something else I was thinking when you were talking, because I probably made that mistake myself in the past, and I came to realize that, when you explain and when you know the challenges we are facing in the world today, it's very easy to have quite a linear way of thinking, like, there are these challenges, we need to address them, let's all do this. But it's a very linear way of thinking when the reality is a lot more complex and you have to take turns. And it almost goes back to the conversation we were having at the beginning about why consumers, there is such a low intake of sustainable products by consumers. in a way, it's a similar way in a company. You need to look beyond what's obvious, which would be let's do everything sustainable. Because as you rightly said, the CEO has responsibilities. Of course, we have fears, there are risks involved, and there is so much to consider. And I think this is when people like you can really come in and help facilitate the process. So let's move on to startups because that's also a very interesting world. So for startups that are already led by a great social and environmental mission, where do you see them struggling usually to grow their business and their reach?
Well, there's many reasons. Well, first, I think they need to understand that their competitive landscape is not just other sustainable solutions, it's actually status quo solutions. So
Yeah.
for instance, the incumbent technology, energy companies, they are competing with the 100% renewable energy companies, so which makes their their competitive landscape not just environmentally focused startups, but the entire industry in which they operate. So I think they need to be aware of that. And so there's a bit of a David and Goliath type of fight. Often they are very small, they are nimble, but they are very small. So, and also there are more and more sustainability focused pure players, so there's also more competition from their own ranks, which is good because you need competition to shape a market. So I think that's one of the challenges. And the status quo incumbent companies, they don't want the change to happen. They're sometimes they pretend they do, but they don't. So they just fight, but they have a lot of resources. They have very deep pockets compared to your startup. So it's hard. You have to be very smart and nimble. And so this is where I think it makes a lot of sense to be really good at designing your product, designing your MVP with good user research, good understanding of what really drives your buyers and the buying journey, and not just a sustainable buyer, because people are not just buyers are not just focused on sustainability as a criteria. It's one of the many criteria that they have in mind. So really understanding what needs you're fulfilling and then embedding that insight into your product or service design, into your storytelling, into your marketing and your sales process to be very efficient, and also being agile and having this kind of test and learn cycles. I think that's really important. And where I think they have something to play is because they are very nimble and they are value driven. If they are good at telling their story, if they have a founder who is really great at speaking, doing thought leadership, that can really help them and give them an edge versus competition. So I always invite founders and leaders of those startups to invest in branding for their business, in really good branding for their business, but also personal branding as a founder or as a leader. So yeah, these are, but there are many other challenges, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. So to expand a little bit more about this, because a good portion of its podcast audience will be sustainable startups. What advice would you have for them in terms of do's and don'ts when they set up or develop their marketing function? Because I've seen many people fail.
So I have a full blog article on this on the ccollective.com.
Oh, good. We'll add this to a show notes as well.
But maybe I'll give you some top 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So again, I think the first one is something along the lines of going beyond green through good user research. So remember what we started the discussion was. So people say they want to be sustainable, because they want to look good and feel good about themselves. But it doesn't always happen because, life happens and because of all the other things that we discussed. So you need to do your research and speak to your target audience or existing clients to uncover what truly motivates their buying decision. What are the pains, the barriers to action, and why is maintaining them in the status quo, basically. So don't take your the sustainability motivation for granted, and don't think it's the only one. So I think that's one thing. So think about cost, think about helping them build a business case, to invest in your technology, especially if we work a lot with B2B companies. So there are many other things that you need to unpack to build your product marketing, your pitch around. Second point, I'd say, if you're very early stage, invest in what I was talking about, the power of authentic personal branding. So the founding team, they need to put some skin in the game as early as possible, crystallize their vision, let their vision shine, let their passion shine, and that will embark a lot of people, investors, early stage customers. I think this is so important. And people who do a great job at doing this, they usually have a thriving business, and they launch and scale faster than others. Then also I was talking about early stage customers. Choose your first customers really well, and customers and partners carefully, to make sure there is a strong brand alignment. So for instance, if you're, I don't know, if you're in a specific business, food business, or some other business, do you really want to have as a first pilot customer a fossil fuel company because they do have a renewable arm, for instance? Do you want to have them on your board, or even a first cap table? So just ask yourself the question if it's worth it. And then there's also huge opportunity on surfing regulatory waves. So I think it is always challenging because regulation changes, and it's really hard to understand those changes. But if you anticipate them and can educate your customers, help them be compliant, help them with the reporting, there's a huge number of businesses that have been built on regulation. And we know that, well, we hope that regulation will continue, evolving in the right direction, at least in Europe.
Yeah, for sure. I think in Europe, I think, at the moment, at least.
Yeah. And then there is, obviously I'm preaching for our own discipline, but invest in your brand. So there are many ways to get that done, but I think you need to invest in the right process, in the right people to create a good brand. So for instance, what you shouldn't take for granted is the fact that because you are a mission-driven brand, your branding is going to be done like this. Well, you still need to invest some time, work with professional designers, make sure that whatever visual identity, tone of voice, works with your customers, investors, and so on. So I think it's really investing in that. Even if it is an investment, I think it's super important.
Yeah, definitely. I really loved what you said about the charisma of the CEOs or founders, because when you were talking, I could immediately imagine some, I've seen at conferences, and they really stand out, like the co-CEOs of Ocean's Bottle, for example, are extraordinary. I'm thinking of others. So to finish on these pieces of advice, would you have any other pieces of advice to create a powerful impact brand in general? that's kind of the holy grail, the $1 million question. But is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I guess the challenge for me is to strike the right balance in terms of what your sustainability promise is and what your brands deliver. So if you're over-promising in terms of sustainability versus what you're actually doing, it's greenwashing. But if you're a truly sustainable, authentic venture with an inspiring brand, it's a missed opportunity for impact in a way. So again, user-centered design can help. Getting some good designers to help you testing different routes, and not overspending on this, but still investing the right amount of resources to get your basics right and to build the foundation of thought leadership, a good website, memorable product names or brand names that will really add up to your equity in the future as you grow your business.
Yeah, that's great. One thing I've seen also, because I've worked with so many impact startups, especially, there is also, this kind of middle between greenwashing and being fully sustainable, which is almost a kind of impossible in the world today because we are all connected. So whatever you do is impacted by everybody else. And sometimes people who are so focused on sustainability, being sustainable, forget that, nobody's perfect. And it's also about owning that. And I think when you are a business, you also need to own what you do and your messages. And obviously you help facilitate that. So education is my next topic because I love the focus you have on education as part of your services. And Marie, I think you are a climate science and biodiversity trainer. Why is climate and biodiversity education so important as part of what you do? Why is it important to look into this?
First, if you think about people of our generation, well, most people in power are, at the height of their career today, people over 40, most of them would have never had any environmental science in their curriculum, or very little. So there's a huge gap of basic understanding and education in that space. So it's really important for everyone to get that minimal understanding of the systemic nature of our climate, of our ecosystems, understanding ecosystem services, and so on. So it's just a basic understanding and understanding the risks and opportunities that come out of it. So I think it's really, really important. And again, that sets the foundation of understanding for action at a systemic level. I think some people naturally have this connection and understanding, and it doesn't prevent them from acting in a way. But if you have a lot of responsibility and you're part of the system, it's actually really important to understand, for instance, the relationship between climate and biodiversity, the role of nature-based solutions on climate change, and why some solutions that tackle climate are not really good for biodiversity, and vice versa. So it's just having this basic systemic understanding across ideally all the planetary boundaries and also the social aspect of our systems.
Yeah, definitely. I find this so important. So I was super pleased to see this as part of your services because, when, like me, I've always had a kind of natural inclination towards this topic, the climate, the environment, nature-based solutions. But you must not forget, not everybody has. And as you said, people of our generation, many of them didn't go from an educational system that tell you about it. Obviously, we are influenced by culture, what you see on Netflix. There are lots of documentaries today. But when you bring things back into the context of business, I think it's important to go back to these foundations and have these explanations in place. That's great. So I wanted to finish the podcast with 2 examples of businesses you've helped. And let's start with startups. Could you give us an example of a startup you've helped and how it made a difference for them to make things more real for people watching and listening?
Recently, we've done several projects with for startups involved in monitoring at a deep level environmental impact, whether it's greenhouse gas monitoring, nature-based solutions monitoring, or life cycle analysis for products in the fashion industry, or also we worked on detergent industry. So I think there's where we can really help is by making sure that from the end user side of things, the visualization of this data is actionable for them. So because environmental data can be incredibly complex to understand and to act upon, okay? So for instance, what we do, so we did a couple of projects in the fashion industry to help designers of goods such as sneakers, trainers, or just clothes really understand very easily the impact across different environmental aspects of their design choices. So the choice of fabric, the way different elements were seamed together, and how a change in this aspect could have a positive or negative ripple effect in the environmental impact on the product, times the number of units that were produced. So overall, we are not building the sort of data engine that is at the back end of this, but we are making sure that the front end works with the right level of jargon that will help your product designer that knows nothing about environmental impact answer questions in their own words and then get a result that is actionable for them. So that is really important, and this is where we do a lot of user research, we do prototypes, we do user testing, and also using our understanding of environmental science, we also make sure that the result is accurate yet approachable to the person who needs to act upon this. And this can be applied to many different sectors, but it's really making sure that you have this simple, intuitive user experience that drives your end user to the desired action or outcome. And again, environmental data can be very complex to capture, but also very complex to bring to life in a meaningful way for the people who need to act upon them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's great. So if we look at a traditional business example now, could you give us the example of an established traditional business you've helped and how did it make a difference for them?
Yes, sure. So we've also helped some traditional businesses with this kind of life cycle assessment tools, and that's really important because it goes into their design engine and it makes them change the way they design their products. And then another idea is the work we do on environmental awareness. So we've trained several businesses, including one of my best experience, facilitating workshop was for a very big real estate company. So I was brought in to train the board of the UK subsidiary. And because it was real estate, we spoke about, obviously, the first part was about understanding climate assistance, but then the last part was about, okay, what do you do about this as a board? And the conversation went really deep in terms of understanding the concepts of embodied carbon, so the carbon that is built into the actual design and fabric of the building versus operating carbon. And that created some really interesting conversation and sort of aha moments of people that were, part of this board of, I think they were like 15 people. And I really enjoyed the conversation between people from, the actual building people and architecture and engineering and the finance people. And that was a really very, very deep conversation and very strategic as well, because these guys, they manage so much real estate in the UK and globally that whatever they do makes a huge impact. So that's the kind of thing that I like doing, starting a conversation that creates some really deep strategic changes and things like, embodied impact versus operating impact is a really important concept, just like, the life cycle analysis tools that we do. I think it's really important that companies understand, the long-term impact of embodied and operating environmental impact, for instance.
Yeah, I really love that you picked these two examples with fashion and real estate, because I've been the co-founder of a sustainable fashion company in the US, and I know this very well. And, the fashion industry is the second polluter in the world in terms of emissions. So finding these solutions and these new ways of thinking and approaching the product and selling them, it's really important. And I'm just finishing a job in interior design. And so I've discovered also that the built sector is such a massive polluter and contributes to a massive amount of emissions. I was absolutely not aware. And it is true that people from the inside are not forcefully aware of themselves, or, unless, you take part to that type of workshops with yourself, it can be very eye-opening, and where these industries are concerned and where, it's big polluters. And, I always say there is nothing wrong because we are all part of a system. So we all need to learn and unlearn and relearn. That's really fascinating. I love that you picked these two examples. So last question for you, Marie, because before we wrap up, this podcast is called Shades of Life, as every guest bring their own color, vision, and mission to it. And I always end it with the same question to know more about you through a different angle. So if you were a color, what would it be and why?
Well, I would say probably somewhere between green and blue, which are for me the most beautiful organic colors representing the two elements. So some blue green or aqua, or I think one of the term is cyan, CYAN. Something like that. Blue green.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, very organic colors, very representative of the planet, I think. That's lovely. So thank you so much, Marie. I really loved your insights today, and I think that will be very valuable and insightful for people who are watching and listening today. Are you planning, if people want to be in touch, obviously I will add your details in the show notes. I think you organize some events or workshops or webinars from time to time. Is that right?
Yeah, we regularly host some sessions on regenerative business transformation, UX, branding, user research. So watch this space. Our website is theccollective.com with a C, as you remember. So yeah, feel free to follow us also on LinkedIn. I'm usually quite active on LinkedIn, so you can, if you do put the link to my LinkedIn profile, you can connect with me and follow me for news and updates.
Yeah, which is always great. I like to make it personal. Thank you so much, Marie. It was great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, really. It was a really nice conversation. I really enjoyed your questions actually and answering them. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for watching and listening.